Today, we will discuss ventilation. You will learn about the science of ventilation, different types of ventilation, what tools to use, and some common mistakes. As many of you know, there's more to firefighting than just getting into the building. The challenge is being able to stay inside long enough to complete your mission. The fire is filling the structure with such thick, dense smoke that many times it's impossible to see. Soaring temperatures will burn unprotected skin and ultimately can be deadly. You must also fight to stay ahead of the moving fire, which is constantly in search of more fuel and more oxygen. Think of it this way. You and the fire are battling it out for the same thing, oxygen. Whoever controls the oxygen supply wins the battle. Ventilation is a big part of this warfare and a key factor in deciding whether the building is saved or burns to the ground. Ventilation can be defined as the process of removing toxic products of combustion and replacing them with fresh air. I like to define ventilation as an ongoing battle between the fire and the firefighters for control of the building. The fire is constantly pumping deadly toxins and flammable gases into the building. Your job is to use the right weapons at the right time to defeat this assault. There are two main reasons to ventilate: to allow the attack team to enter and operate inside the structure, or what we call venting for fire, and to provide fresh air for breathing and to improve visibility while searching, or venting for life. Unfortunately, some firefighters forget the difference, or even worse, the need for ventilation in the first place. Because SCBA is so common, some people think that ventilation isn't as important as it used to be, because our firefighters can breathe. But there's a real problem with this. First, it totally ignores any victims that might still be inside. Second, they assume that their masks will always protect them, and unfortunately, that isn't always so. Several firefighters have been killed in recent years when they've had problems with their masks in contaminated areas. They ran out of air, got entangled, or had their face pieces pulled from their faces. Also, remember that your mask is designed to protect you against smoke, but not heat or flame. The difference between venting for life and venting for fire is the timing of the ventilation. By this, I mean if you determine that there are lives at risk, you should begin venting for life as soon as possible. Keep in mind that once you begin venting, the fire may intensify, but if done correctly, the venting will draw the fire away from the life hazard. Take, for example, the crowded apartment houses, so commonly found in many cities. In New York City, one member from each of the first two ladder trucks immediately goes to the roof and performs ventilation over the interior stairway and any other vertical shafts. They do this without orders at every working fire. This draws the fire out through the top, into the open air, instead of allowing it to mushroom on the upper floors and spread into those apartments. Immediate vertical ventilation has saved hundreds of lives by drawing the fire away from the victims. It should be the primary ventilation tactic at most low-rise, non-fireproof apartment houses or multiple dwellings. On the other hand, venting for fire is usually delayed until resources are in place to attack the fire. For example, if you respond to a heavy smoke condition pouring from a second-floor apartment in a 4-story apartment house and you're having trouble with the nearest hydrant, you should hold off on performing horizontal ventilation until the charged hose line's in position. Once the attack has begun, you can vent the windows opposite the hose line, allowing the products of combustion to be blown ahead. There are many different types of ventilation and different results from each of them. In the example I just gave you, the horizontal ventilation functioned as venting for fire. It can also be used to assist in saving lives. Here's how. If a person is in a room adjacent to the fire area, venting the windows will bring in life-saving fresh air. However, if you don't remove the victim right away, you may worsen the situation by drawing the fire toward the vented window. If you use horizontal ventilation for life, either bring in a hose line to protect the victim, or if possible, remove the victim. The most important part of ventilation is the proper amount of ventilation. If the fire is of low intensity, such as a smoky mattress or food on a stove, you should open the windows, not break them. Window ventilation is best for most house fires or other structures that have similarly high window-to-room size ratios. It's very quick and relatively easy to do, and it can be targeted to specific rooms. The guide I use is if you can stand up long enough to manipulate the locks, then raise the windows. If you can't stand up for that high or for that long because of the heat, then it's time to take out the glass. This is a good rule of thumb, but there are a few additional points to make. First, find out if the fire is under control and if search efforts are complete and no victims were found. If that is the case, you can raise the window instead of breaking the glass, even if the area is warm to hot. On the other hand, if a victim is missing, If the fire is extending or if there is a very dense smoke condition, you should break the glass, even if it's not very hot. Venting not only provides fresh air to victims, it improves conditions for firefighting, leading to earlier control. Also, firefighters are less likely to become disoriented or trapped if visibility improves. When you break out a glass window, it gives you twice as much window opening area as raising a double-hung window. Obviously, once you've broken a window, you can't reverse it, so timing is everything. Venting too early will allow the fire to grow, but delaying ventilation will cause unnecessary heat for the firefighters. Generally, you should vent for fire attack just as the hose line begins its attack. It's best to coordinate this by radio. A member of the attack team should give the word to take the windows, just as they open the nozzle. One big exception to this sequence is in the case of double or triple pane energy-efficient windows. In this case, a sudden rush of oxygen can cause a backdraft. If you encounter energy-efficient windows, vent the windows as soon as possible while the attack team is in a safe area, preferably behind a closed door. If that isn't possible, wait to vent until after the hose team has thoroughly cooled the fire area. Other factors that will help you decide whether to use vertical or horizontal ventilation, or both, include the size and location of the fire, the construction of the building, and the wind. Horizontal ventilation is preferred at minor to moderate fires. A mattress fire will produce a lot of smoke, but will not be hot enough to make the smoke rise very far. Therefore, vertical ventilation wouldn't be a good choice there. Many times, horizontal ventilation is faster and easier to perform than vertical ventilation because there are already openings, such as windows and doors. Plus, it can often be carried out from the ground level or from a one-man portable ladder. Vertical ventilation usually requires a longer ladder and more manpower to get to the roof. Another plus to horizontal ventilation is that it costs less to repair than vertical ventilation, unless, of course, there are already man-made openings on the roof. Glass is much cheaper to replace than a section of the roof. The type of roof will also help to determine the type of ventilation required. Peaked roofs, found on many homes, are usually easier to vent by using the windows in the gable ends, or dormers, than by cutting the roof. While flat roofs or poured concrete would be extremely difficult to vent in any case, unless a built-in opening such as a skylight already exists. This doesn't mean that vertical ventilation is less important than horizontal, it just means that it has its place. Vertical ventilation can be a deciding factor in whether the fire is stopped or continues to expand. When materials burn, they release hot gases, which take up huge amounts of space, usually hundreds of times the volumes of the original burning material. This gas tries to rise, and when it can't, it spreads out horizontally. You need to create a way for this mushrooming gas to go straight up and out of the building, taking a lot of the heat with it. When you vent large amounts of this hot gas horizontally, it flows under the ceiling toward the open window, spreading heat in this direction. When this happens, other combustibles are being preheated, as are the firefighters trying to approach. In these circumstances, if you make the right size opening in the roof, the relief is dramatic. Fire moving horizontally can be stopped, and visibility and heat conditions improve almost immediately. As I said earlier, not every fire demands or even allows for vertical ventilation. Fires that are relatively small, as well as those in lower portions of the structure, far away from vertical openings, probably won't benefit from opening the roof. On the other hand, roof venting would be a good choice for fires in attics and cocklofts.